This is the first video of using Strabo while in the field. Now while you're in the field and you want to form a spot or a location, you are at an outcrop, so let's say this area right here. We've identified that we're at this spot, and you want to make a point because you found something interesting, you want to take a strike and dip, or you want information of that spot remembered. So what you'll do is you come over to the top button. This is the spot button. When you press this, it'll give you the small blue dot. Press the small blue dot where you are. If you are unsure of where you are, you can hit this button and it'll GPS locate you to the exact spot. Once you press the button, it'll prompt this window to pop up. Now, as we saw in video 1, in preparing for the field, you can assign a certain starting spot name. Here we've assigned MM1 for Malpai Mesa, spot number 1. So that's what it started with. If you want to change it, feel free to change that. It gives you the latitude and longitude of the area you're in. And if you come down lower, you can add or remove a geologic unit. Now this goes into a tag group. So we're going to. Let's say we're on tertiary basalt. So that's a unit we've identified, and we're going to select it. Okay, if this is not the unit, or you want to make a new unit, come up here and press this plus button. It'll prompt you to give a name of the tag and then a type. These types range from geologic unit, a concept, documentation, or anything else. Okay, so we're going to stick with our tertiary basalt. Down here, you can write a note. Say you're standing on a cliff face or there's an interesting feature, anything like that. It's just to be recorded later. Other, this is an ID number. Now, if you have not set up a starting spot name, this ID number will show up as a spot name. Now above us, we have a couple of tabs. We have orientations, 3D structures, images, nesting, samples, other features, inferences, tags, and more. Now to control what you want to and don't want to see, click on the More tab. This will let you toggle which tabs you see. It'll also remind you of your naming conventions. MM for Malpai Mesa, 2 is a starting spot number for spots following this one, and sample prefixes and samples starting sample numbers, which we'll see in just a moment. Now if we go back to see the rest of our tabs, we'll click on orientations. Here you can add a plane, a line, tabular zone. So for example, if you add a plane, a label, if you don't put in a label, say strike and dip on south-facing face, anything like that, it will automatically assign one depending on what your strike dip is and the type of planar feature. Now if you set your iPad portrait face up on your dip with the home button down dip, you can press this button. This gives the software the dip direction and strike, so they'll automatically be filled in for you. Come down, this just gives you more options to assign a more specific idea, so to be more accurate. Quality, just to remind you later, so if you find some data that maybe disagrees with what you found and this was a poor, irregular, uncertain, you can deal with that then. Planar feature type, bedding, contact, foliation, fracture, whatever you decide to assign it as. Movement amount if there's movement, planar feature thickness, feature length, and more notes, anywhere to add more notes. Okay, if you want to add a line, same type of thing. This instead is a trend and plunge. Same thing, you can use your compass here. So that's orientations. If you want to add a 3D structure, these would be a fabric, a fold, tensor, other. Similar to orientations, label, fabric type, tectonite, igneous, magmatite, and so on. And feel free to add those here. Now images, you can take an image of your sample and they are image oriented. So just click this button and a camera will be prompted for you to take a picture, or you can select one from your camera roll. Next button is nesting, if you want to add a nest. Now a nest or nesting is a collection of spots that share some spatial relationship with one another. For example, part of the same structure in the same location. So this is very location oriented. For example, a dike, cutting, layering, all in the same location. This could also mean a hierarchy of spatial spots, meaning that spots can fit spatially within or around other spots. Now there's two types of nesting terms, an upward nest and a downward nest. A downward nest is fitting spots within a larger spot spatially, with subsequent observation having the same or smaller spot size contained within the starting spot. That may be a little bit confusing, but for example, establishing a structure and then automatically relating further observations or measurements, like spots, to it. You can also group spots together that share a characteristic, like the same bed or a same layer. These are all downward nesting. This would be more of a field application. Upward nesting is fitting spots into a larger spot in spatial extent. For example, a set of bed measurements are used to define a fold orientation, so a bunch of measurements that define a larger fold. This is usually done after you're done collecting data and more in lab. That's what a nest is. If you have any more questions about nests, feel free to check out our spot and the nest section where the definitions are more defined. Moving on, we have samples. Here you can add a sample. Once you do that, as you notice, same as the spot, our automatic sample-specific ID name appears that we assigned. If you have not assigned one ahead of time, nothing will show up here. You will just give it one. Again, label whatever you want to label it, just for memory's sake. Orientated, so on, sample description, material type, intact, fragmented, sediment, so on, sample size, roughly how big it is. This is just to remind you when you get back to lab or back out of the field to keep track of what samples you've taken. Okay, now once you've added a sample, so for me it's Malpine Mesa sample 1, it'll come up here with a red circle with a line through it. This is if you would like to delete it. If this isn't the sample you wanted, delete. Here's a tag. This gives us our tag group. So this is the tag that we had earlier, so tertiary basalt. I'm going to add it to it because this is all in the same unit that we were in. Okay, so there's our sample. Moving on to other features. If you want to add a feature, this gives you a little bit more ability to make this kind of your own label, your own feature name, feature description. If there's something that we haven't necessarily added into a tab or label or anything like that, and you just wanted to have a feature and define it in your own way, label, feature type, feature name, feature description. This gives you a little bit more access to that. Okay, inferences. Now this is kind of more into our interpretation aspect of field mapping. So here, a Rosetta, you can assign it as a Rosetta, meaning that it is that important, it's particularly significant, like it says. Feel free to select that. If you do and you have other Rosettas outcrops, it will show how it's related. Describe the outcrop, is in place, a relationship to other outcrops, so on. Okay, and lastly we have tags. Tags is something we set up earlier, tertiary basalt, but you can add more, you can filter it. This just kind of shows you all the different tags you have. In this case, I'm using my tags as geologic units. Alright, so once you're finished with that, you can either click this button, which shows it on a map, the garbage, or if you select this, you can copy the spot and paste it over a couple of other spots. Okay, so we're going to select this to show what it looks like on the map. And there it is. Here it says MM1, what I labeled a spot. If you added a orientation, a plane, anything like that, it'll show up as a strike and dip measurement, oriented so that if it's towards the southeast, it'll show it in that direction. If it's a fault, so on, it's going to show that symbol here, and it'll give the degrees of dip or what's appropriate in your aspect. Okay, so there's your spot. If you want to go back into it, just tap the spot. It'll appear the spot name. Click it. You're back at the start to edit anything. Another way to access your spot, if you're back here, is to go to your little three-dashed menu. Come over here towards spots. Click that, and here is your spot. As you get mapping, you'll have a lot more spots, and they'll all show up here. Yet another way to access this home page. Now if you go back, you have this button, which is a filter. If you have more than one data set active, it'll show all of them, and you can click Malpine Mesa, and if you have other ones active, you can select or deselect some of those. If you're unsure what data set is, also go to our page, but it's very accurately described in our first video when we set up data sets before the field. Next, this button will add a new spot, so if you click that, here we are to add a second spot, except here it shows us set to my location or set from map. If you click set from map, it's similar to what we did for our first spot. If you have set to my location, it'll use your GPS where you are to locate to the exact spot that you're at. Alrighty, so we're going to go back to our main map, and there's our spot. So once you have a couple of spots and you have a whole area covered, it'll look very nice. If you have any questions, look on our Making a Spot page. That concludes the fourth video of using Strabo, or the first video in the field. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below or check out our spot at strabospot.com. Thank you.